Dear friends, one of the most important questions that I ever get in my consultations is about dependent relatives. What happens when you have a surviving parent or you have parents who are now older, have medical issues, are by themselves, have loneliness issues, have all sorts of other problems because they don't have any family living with them? Now, the typical scenario that I'm talking about is, and this is something that a lot of people would identify with. Certainly, I identified this at one point in my life when my parents were getting into those ages where they could not be left by themselves anymore. They could not live by themselves anymore. And any number of servants or carers or the so-called carers, I say that because they never actually provided the right kind of care that they required. So when you look at it in those terms, when you look at it in terms of the kind of care that they require, is that something that they're getting? Sure, they'll get their medication. Sure, they'll get their hospital visits. If you have a taxi arranged for them or you have somebody who comes and picks them up and takes them to the hospital, yeah, it can be done. But what about those situations where they're by themselves and there is an emergency and there is nobody there to take care of them? Those are the kind of situations that you worry about. Those are the kind of situations that you never want your parents to go through. So, this is what I'm talking about today, the adult dependent relatives applications. What does it say? What the law is, what the requirements are, how do you get to those, what are the practical difficulties, and how to go about making these applications successfully and getting successful results out of them. So let's look at first what the idea is, what is the law behind it. As already mentioned, you could be a British national. You could have your parents. Let's say I give my own example. My parents were in Pakistan. I am in the UK. I am working and living in the UK. I have my family in the UK. Now, if one or both of my parents are unwell or they get into those ages where they can't look after each other or can't be looked after by other people, I would obviously want to have them over in the UK with me so that I can take care of them. If that is the kind of situation that you find yourselves in, then this is the video that you need to listen to. The point being, the adult dependent relative application says that by reason of age, illness, or disability, the person is unable to look after themselves on a day-to-day basis and requires long-term personal care. And that long-term personal care is either unavailable or unaffordable, even with the practical and financial assistance of the sponsor in the UK, which could be you. So what we are saying is that the parents, or it could also be other relatives. It could be your uncle, it could be an auntie, it could be brothers, sisters, it could be anybody. As long as you are talking about relatives who are close enough to you that you are taking care of, then that can be done. So we look at it in these terms. First of all, what we're talking about, when the person is unable to look after themselves on a day-to-day basis. So everyday chores, you're taking your medication, are you going for your walk, are you eating well, are you able to change on your own, are you able to look after your personal hygiene on your own, are you able to go have a bath on your own or shower on your own, all those things which are everyday chores that we all have. Now, if your parent or the surviving parent or both parents are unable to do that, then this is the kind of scenario that we're looking at. Now, when you say that they are unable to look after themselves on a day-to-day basis, what reason is that for? Is it because of their age or their illness or disability, or could be a combination of two or three of these things even? So a lot of times I see somebody who's getting on with their age, they're in their late 70s or 80s or even in their late 60s. The Asian diet is bad. The Asian diet causes blood pressure problems, diabetes, kidney failures, all sorts of other problems. And these are the kind of things that generally we look at when we are doing these applications. So if you have medical evidence, if you can show that these are the kind of things that you are suffering from and that you require long-term personal care for it. Now, long-term personal care, what does that mean? Every word has a meaning. And every word has an importance. That's why I'm talking about everything. So, when we talk about long term, if somebody's broken a leg, for example, that is not a long term injury. That is something that can be fixed with the right kind of cast or the right kind of surgery or whatever it may require. But they are expected to recover from that. So, if that is the kind of situation, we don't bring that into the adult dependent relatives realm. What we are talking about is where there is a long term problem that they need to be looked after for. And that is where we bring in the idea of carers who can look after them. Now, if you have siblings in the country and your parents are able to be looked after by them, that's great. A lot of times the objection we face is that you've got daughters in the country and they can look after you, and why are the son or the sons making the applications for you to come over? The problem is when you look at the cultural background, if the cultural background is such that the father or the mother or the surviving parent is going to be looked after by the son or the eldest son, or whatever the family backgrounds are. I'm not saying that every single person will have the same scenario, but there will be things which are very common culturally. So culturally speaking, if we're talking about Pakistan, for example, you don't expect the daughters who are living with their husbands and have their families and are looking after their own in-laws, they don't expect or cannot expect them to look after their parents as well, because they've already got their hands full. So this is where the sons will usually come in, culturally speaking. Please don't take anything as a general statement of facts. All I'm saying is how I see things on a daily basis from client to client interactions. So that is what I'm talking about. So when you see that a person who's a British national, he's got his parents in Pakistan, they are unable to look after themselves. The daughters who are there in the country but are married, are with their own in-laws, have their own children, have their own husbands to look after, and they cannot find time to come and do that. Then what do? Well, the Home Office position is you can get carers or you can put them in old age homes. Now, how many of Pakistani people would actually put their parents in old age homes when they get to a certain age? They've looked after you throughout your lives. They've brought you up well. They've provided for you. They've given you the education, which entitles you to a position where you are now sitting in the UK as a British national, making a living, looking after your family. Again, cultural and examples that I've taken from my clients that I'm talking about. So would that parent be expecting you to go to an Eidhi home in Lahore, for example, or Karachi or Faisalabad or wherever, and say, okay, fine, just leave me here. As long as you keep paying them some monthly money, I'll be fine. I'll stay by myself. That is, again, not the cultural norm in there. So the Home Office position is, well, you can find these centers or you can find carers who can come and look after you. The actual reality is you will always have some servants. So servants are usually poor people who come from villages. They're not medically trained. They're not able to administer any medication. They're not able to do anything in terms of first aid or in terms of emergencies or reactions to emergencies. So they're not reliable in the sense that you can leave a parent or you can leave an elderly person with them to completely look after. And then, of course, there is all sorts of there are all sorts of problems with servants not taking care of them. They're being negligent. They're being rude. They're being abusive to them. Even in the UK, there were scandals about care homes where people were being subjected to abuse in the UK. And imagine where in Pakistan, for example, there is unregulated care homes that are basically money-making machines. They're not providing the correct care or the right kind of support that these people require. And if they're not getting that, that means that they may be living, they may be breathing and eating and moving, but that's not living their life to the fullest. That's not the respect that they deserve. That's not the self-respect that they want to live with. That's not the confidence that they want to have in themselves, having worked all their lives and got to a point where now they are unable to take care of themselves and there is nobody else there. So these are the kind of situations that we look to fulfill and look to cater to when we do an adult dependent relative application. What happens afterwards? The law, what does that say? That you have the everyday chores you're not able to take care of, and even with the practical and financial help of the sponsor, you are unable to find the support because either it's unavailable or unaffordable. Now, affordability I'm not getting into because affordability, if you are able to afford, that's fantastic, you can provide that care. But in my experience, from what I've seen from my clients, there is a huge problem. And that huge problem is not about affordability, it's about the kind of care required. Let me give you an example. I was in court earlier this week dealing with an adult dependent relative application. And the matter was such that the lady in question had dementia problems. She was not happy talking to anybody else, only wanted to speak to her son. And the son actually left the UK, went to Pakistan, has been living and staying with the mother, trying to look after her on the basis that we're going to do an application and we're going to take you abroad, to the UK. Now, they did the application and the application got refused. With the resultant appeal, we are in court, and this is where the hearing was. So the family are now waiting. The son is there, has been there for about 2 years now, because he went earlier. And there could be problems with his own wife and his own children, because he has had to leave all of that. And this was one of the main points that I was arguing in court, that you need to also look at the best interest of his children, who are without a father, who are suffering because they don't have the father there. The mother is suffering because she needs the support of the husband there, and he is being a dutiful son looking after his mother because there is nobody else available who can look after her. And why? Because it's not just a matter of giving her medication or just a matter of giving her food. She's got dementia. And she gets aggressive. When she gets aggressive, no carer is going to stay. The servants do not stay. When they misbehave with her, she gets very upset and gets angry on that. So the food that they're serving her, inadequate. Sometimes she's got blood pressure issues. And sometimes the food had so much salt that her blood pressure would shoot up. Then there were situations where they had a camera put into the house just to see what was happening in the house, and they found out that one of the servants was putting sugar in the tea. Now, if you're doing that, and she's got diabetes, and she's very, very susceptible to highs and lows in diabetes, then that could cause huge issues. So what would happen is they would give her the sugar, the extra sugar, and she would actually go to sleep for longer periods of time, giving the servant time to sit there, chat on the phone, or go watch a movie, just go to sleep or whatever. So these are the kind of problems that servants present with elderly parents who are left by themselves. And this is again something that is on a case-to-case basis. We have to explain it to the judges. We have to explain it through evidence. So when you're doing these applications, what happens with the application? What happens with the evidence that needs to be going in there? The evidence that you're supplying is, firstly, medical evidence to identify what the problems are. Secondly, again, medical evidence, or somebody who knows, who can tell you that this is the kind of problem that she's facing and what she is suffering from, because of which what kind of activities she's unable to perform. Then you look at what kind of support and help is available, what family is there, what additional family members or extended family members are there. If nothing, then you look at what kind of service can be provided. Are there carers available? Are there servants available? And when you talk about servants, there are all these horror examples. There was another case which was just an absolute shocker, where the lady had been muffled up by her dupatta and she was actually shoved into a cupboard whilst they went through all her belongings, and unfortunately she suffocated and died in that cupboard. So there are horrifying examples of mistreatment being given or meted out to elderly people. But this is the world we live in, where we have to find our own way, and case-to-case basis, we need to provide this evidence. So when you're talking about an elderly person living there by themselves, and you're talking about the support available, if you could have a nurse come in who looks after all the needs properly, and then there's another shift, and then there's another shift, that would be fantastic. If they're medically trained, if they are properly organized, if they are properly scrutinized, if they're properly able to give account of what's happening, so they are accountable. These things, in our experiences or from the clients or from the information that we get, it just does not happen. Now, there are organizations that claim that they will do that, but they are so few in numbers that it's impossible to look at that. Now, these adult dependent relative applications are notoriously bad at being successful. And the reason for that is that the rules are at such a high threshold that it's very difficult to prove that. So, for example, when you're talking about the care available to this elderly person that is the applicant, the rules, the way they are worded, literally it seems like you have to say that there is no person in the entire country who will be able to provide that care. How do you provide that evidence? How do you prove that? Again, on a case-to-case basis, looking at their circumstances, looking at where they are, looking at what their needs are. According to their needs, we then decide what kind of care would be available. And from the care available, then you see whether or not this care is suitable for them. Britsits is a case that deals with this point. Britsits was a case brought against the adult dependent relative applications rules that were purported, and they were so difficult to follow that there was litigation on it. But the court ruled that there was nothing wrong with the law as it was. It was a high threshold and it had to be met. But there were tests in the or prescribed in the judgment itself, and that is what we use in order to differentiate one case from another, because everything has its own test and we have to look at all the evidence that goes with that. So with these applications, they are not cheap, they are not simple, they are lengthy, and all these things need to be taken into account. What we are talking about, the Home Office fee is around £3,400 for these applications, and usually these applications get refused at the first stage, and then we have to go into an appeal, and at the appeal, because you're able to talk to a judge, you're able to argue your point, then there is a realistic chance that you can win those appeals. So for Bukhari Chambers, of course, the vast majority of cases that we've had successful for adult dependent relative applications have all been at the appeals, not at the initial case stages. So please prepare your applications well, make sure that you've got all the evidence, make sure that you understand what you're doing. And please, if you do not understand something properly, don't just do a little research, a little Google search here or there and then say, oh, now I know what to do, and just do the application. Please understand that whatever information is given once, that information now stays in the immigration history of that person. So you go do the application yourself, you get refused over there, you come to me and say, well, I want to go into an appeal. If you have said something which is damaging to your case, which you just cannot change, then there is nothing I can do about it, because that damaging part will be part of your application. So instead of doing these applications yourself, I would always say, speak to somebody who understands these, who understands what the law is, who understands in practice how to deal with these applications. Because I promise you, even with my experience, and I've been dealing with these kind of cases for over 20 years, even with my experience, I am sometimes thrown a curveball in court, and you have to deal with it. You have to have the right experience, and with the knowledge of the law, with the experience that you've had in practice, then you are able to deal with those things. So applications, extremely important. Even if they get refused, they still need to be done right. So please don't think of that example where you think, well, application is going to be refused anyway, might as well get it refused myself and then I'll go to a lawyer. Please don't do that, because whatever the lawyer is going to do in an appeal will be dependent on what you put in that application. So understand that. Secondly, if the matter is gone into appeal, please make sure that, again, you're not doing your own surgeries on this. You make sure that you go to a lawyer who understands what the law is, who understands how to put the evidence together, and who can go and be a bulldog in court and fight for you. Otherwise, there is no point. When I talk about fighting for you in court, it is because the way the Home Office will approach it is a very summary way. They will say, well, what are you talking about? We've gone through the SIPIN. SIPIN is the Country Policy and Information Notes. Now, there is a SIPIN report on every country that the Home Office have got. So what they look at is, when you say that Pakistan has a problem with providing care to elderly people, they will say, well, our SIPIN says there is Shifa International and they have a department that deals with geriatrics. Or we've got this other Aga Khan hospital that deals with this. So they'll give you a couple of examples and then say, and we've looked at this, and there are care homes available in this town, and they have branches in Lahore, Karachi, and Peshawar. There you go. You've got care available. That's literally how they will leave it. Now, in practice, you would know, living in Pakistan, how it is going to be if you say, well, somebody who lives in Lahore is going to be sent to Karachi, where they've never lived before, because the Home Office says there is a care home available. And those care homes, in my experience, what we have tried to find out and learn from is either those care homes don't have any availability, they have long waiting lists, and plus there are still restrictions due to which you cannot leave somebody there completely. Someone still has to go and check up on them, maybe take them out for the weekends or something like that. So all these things come in. Practical importance of experiences cannot be underutilized or underestimated. So please understand that. If you're doing these applications, get proper legal advice, understand what the legal principles are, understand what kind of evidence needs to be put together, and then once you commit to going for this, do not look back. Then you fight, then you make your application. If it gets refused, go into appeal. If the appeal gets dismissed, look at the refusal points, go again. Because those problems that your parents have are not going to disappear if the judge has not allowed the appeal. So I believe in these cases. Again, like I said, I've gone through my own parents' cases with these matters, so I know what it feels like. But if you want to talk to me about it in detail, or if you have a case, or if you have a situation where you would like to discuss with us, of course, you know where to find us. Thank you very much for listening.